Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Regent Bailing?
Here.
Regent Peterson? Here. Regent Atwell?
Here.
Regent Bechtel?
Here.
Regent Delgado? Here. Regent Greedy?
Here.
Regent Hall? Here. Regent Jones?
Here.
Regent Klein?
Here.
Regent Milner? Regent Mueller?
Here.
Regent Peterson?
Here.
Regent Plant?
Here.
Regent Ring?
Mine's not going to last very long.
Regent Stanford Taylor? Here. Regent Tiedemann?
Here.
Regent Tyler?
Here.
Regent Whitburn?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we consider items on today's agenda, are there board members who wish to declare any conflicts of interest regarding today's open session agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed with the agenda. First off, I'd like to say we have, even in Wisconsin's worst weather, perfect attendance. So thank you, everyone.
Congratulations.
I'd also like to offer our thanks to Chancellor Blank and her team for welcoming us to campus. This campus is a tremendous place, and we look forward to hearing from the Chancellor and her staff. Thank you, Chancellor. We have a full agenda today, but before we get started, it's my pleasure to introduce our newest colleague to the board, Carolyn Stanford Taylor. Carolyn was recently appointed State Superintendent of Wisconsin's Department of Public Instruction, which also makes her a member of this board. She has 4 decades of education experience, including 17 years as the state's Assistant State Superintendent. She's a native of Mississippi and a UW-Madison alum. That's also not her only connection to the UW system, as her sister and our longtime budget leader, Frida Harris, was with the system for almost 30 years. Carolyn, good morning and welcome. Let's give Carolyn a round of applause.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. As you mentioned, I am a UW graduate. I did both my undergraduate and graduate work here, and I am deeply honored to be a part of this board and the great work that you are all doing. And as you all know, that we bring our own life experiences to the work that we do, and my journey also informs the way I intend to operate on the board. I was one of the first students to integrate my public schools in Marks, Mississippi. Marks, of course, is the place where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. chose as the starting point for the Poor People's Campaign in 1968. So the barriers I saw and experienced haven't been erased, and while we've made some progress, we understand that there's still much work to be done. I have, as you heard, dedicated my life to this work as a teacher, a principal, assistant state superintendent, and now as superintendent of the Department of Public Instruction. I left Marks and came to Wisconsin to seek higher education. My undergraduate work was in elementary education and graduate was in educational administration. I know that the education that we provide at the University of Wisconsin system changes lives because it changed mine. And I look forward to working with all of you as we continue to support the students on our campuses as they look to change their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, and wonderful to have you here today. President Cross, I believe you have some introductions as well.
Yes, thank you, Regent President Bailing, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Cheryl Green, the interim chancellor at UW-Whitewater. Cheryl, would you stand up? To serve in this role, Cheryl had to step down from her role at Oshkosh, which was meant with Andy didn't care for that at all. So thank you, Andy, for allowing that. Prior to joining UW-Oshkosh, she served as an assistant vice president for student affairs at Tennessee State University. She also served at Chicago State University in a variety of roles. Chancellor Green has a PhD and master's degree in counseling psychology from Southern Illinois and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Manchester College, now Manchester University in Indiana. She also holds a National Incident Management System certificate from the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Institute. So welcome, Cheryl. We're really looking forward, and already have enjoyed working with you, so welcome. I'm also pleased to introduce a new member of the Systems State Relations team, Deej Lundgren. He joins Jeff Brandt as a state director. Deej is our new director of state relations. Where is Deej? Oh, he's standing up back there. He previously worked for Congressman Sensenbrenner in his Washington office, and he served as chief of staff to the Finance Committee, co-chair Senator Alberta Darling. So welcome, Deej. Nice to have you here. Back to you, President Bailey.
Thank you, President Cross. At this time, let's hear from our hosting chancellor, Chancellor Blank. Chancellor Blank, good afternoon, and the floor is yours.
The floor was hers all along.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. I'm always delighted to have a chance to host the Regents, and I always particularly appreciate the opportunity to spend a little bit of time talking about my favorite topic, which is the University of Wisconsin here in Madison. So I know that this is my chance to talk specifically about this university. I'm going to get there in a minute, but I want to start a level off. I want to begin with a claim that I believe very deeply. There is no single institution in our nation more important to economic growth than the public research university. Research universities are central to U.S. economics for two reasons. First, they produce very highly skilled workers, central retaining a lead in a global labor market. And secondly, they're a source of long-term innovation through the basic and the applied research that they do. And in the long run, growth is much more dependent upon technological innovation than any other factor. Now, no two factors are more important to growth of a global economy than a deep pool of skilled labor and a strong base for innovation and discovery. That is what research universities do, which is why they're so important to the nation. But the public universities are particularly important because of their size and scope. We belong to what's called the American Association of Universities, the AAU. It's the 60 biggest research universities in the country. You could name every one of them. On the private side, it's Duke and Harvard and Stanford. On the public side, it's Michigan, Wisconsin, Berkeley. It's almost equally split with 30 publics and 30 privates. If you look at that group of schools, the top schools in the country, 82% of the undergraduate degrees given by AAU schools are awarded at the public universities. 2/3 of the PhDs that are awarded by those 60 schools are awarded at the public universities. And about 60% of the research dollars that flow through those schools flow through the public universities. And of course, none of that counts the contributions that many other public universities make, including, of course, the University of Wisconsin and Milwaukee and the other schools represented here. We are entering another budget year in this state, and there's never a more important time to talk about the contributions that our universities make, not just to the state, but to the long-term health of this nation. So let me turn to some specific news from UW-Madison. It has been, by and large, a good year here. We have two buildings that are a little waterlogged as a result of burst pipes, but putting that aside, a stable state budget combined with some hard work on our campus to increase our investment opportunities have led to a year in which it really feels like we are moving forward. And to give you a flavor of that, let me indicate 5 news items that are important to us. So news item number 1, strong and rising applications. Last year, our applications went up by 20%. That was an unexpected jump, partly about our movement onto the Common App, as well as a few other things. We currently, this year, are expecting about 44,000 applicants. That is a 3% increase over last year. There is a slight, a bigger increase out of state than in state, as always happens, but we are slightly up in state as well. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a 34% increase in our applications. And as you all know, a strong application pool is absolutely central to our ability to recruit a high-quality class. Which leads to our second item of news. We actually have rising student quality here at the university, and you can see this in both our in-state and our out-of-state applications. And I could march you through a number of numbers from the different application pools, as well as the admitted students pools, but let me give you one example. We started, in part at the request of the Regents, but partly because we needed to do this, what we call the PRIME program in 2016. This is an effort to keep the state's top students here in the state in college. If they stay here for college, they're much more likely to go to work here, to stay here for their career. So targeting Wisconsin students with top grades and top ACT scores with high-touch admissions efforts is very important to us. As we identify these students, they hear from us on campus. That includes faculty members in the departments that they're interested in. I had lunch with a group of PRIME students earlier this week from 18 Wisconsin high schools. Their average ACT score was 33, which is in the top 1% of ACT scores. Since starting PRIME, we've added a little over 300 additional Wisconsin students to our freshman class who score at the 95th percentile in the ACT or above. And I count that as real success and exactly what we should be doing as the flagship university here on campus. Thank you. News item number 3, we've got a number of new facilities. I'll show you just a couple of them here. I suspect many of you have noticed the Hamill Music Performance Building that's going up on University right next to the Chasen Art Museum. We're going to have a lovely arts campus right there in sort of a mini campus. It's going to provide new performance space for our music program, much needed. If you've been to some of their previous performances in their existing space, there are no state dollars involved in this. This is entirely gift dollars. The Center for Dairy Research, a very important aspect of our campus. Babcock Hall, which is what this is in renovated form when it's done, has needed renovation for 30 years. It's a 1950s building. And particularly the dairy plant in there and some of the equipment have been obsolete for more than 1 decade. So new space and new equipment is going to open up a lot of new opportunities for food science research as well as for the production of Babcock ice cream. And the dairy industry is very involved in this. They were actually major funding contributors. There's state money in this as well. And I'm very excited. This building will be opening in 2021. We've just started the renovations in this past year. And then lastly, you all have heard about this many times, and I appreciate all your support in getting to this point. Our chemistry building has started its first round of renovations. This is a 2-part project. They build a new tower and some new labs and new HVAC systems and then connect them onto the old building and renovate parts of the old building. We broke ground in September. This is absolutely critical to bottlenecks in our chemistry program, which almost every student in our STEM areas takes a chemistry class. And we need to have the new labs and facilities to do that well. 55% of our undergraduates take at least one chemistry class. This is a building that had some burst pipes in it. So it, as I say, is not quite in the condition we want it to be in, but we're working very hard in getting it cleaned up and getting all our classes running normally again. News item number 4, you know about this as well. I'm really excited about the integration of UW-Madison with Cooperative Extension and Wisconsin Public TV and Radio. The Regents are the ones who have made that possible. This is adding 1,000 new employees to UW-Madison. That's been a heavy lift as a transition. We're not over it yet. We brought all of the leadership of Extension into UW-Madison. They officially have started reporting to us as of the beginning of this fiscal year, last July, but we have yet to transition most of those 1,000 employees. We hope to do that by the end of this fiscal year. The most important part of this is not the transition. The most important part is what we can do after the transition, and we're already working hard on that. Our opportunities to tie our research and our educational ventures more closely into Extension and public media to enrich their programming, I think is huge. And our opportunities to learn from them and to be much more connected to certain parts of the states is equally huge. So we've acquired a number of new stakeholders. One of the things I've been doing this last year is I've visited different parts of the state. I'm meeting with the county executives, a group I've never had any connection with before nor any reason to connect with, and talking to them about how they use our extension programs and how we can make this work effectively. An example of this partnership, in December, we announced a new partnership between the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery and Wisconsin Public Television. They are working together to create an education innovation lab, getting UW researchers involved in the K-12 science curriculum that airs on public TV and will beam straight into the homes of millions of homes and classrooms around the state. And this is funded by a wonderful gift from some of our donors. Later in this spring, we're going to be holding a major event on the opioid crisis. And both Extension, our researchers in medical school and in public health, together with communities, are all going to come together to talk about what is the problem in Wisconsin, what do we know about how to deal with this problem, what are best practices, and how can we all work together on that. So this has just been a great opportunity, and I appreciate our ability to bring these units together. And finally, fifthly, this is not in the category of good news, but it's important news for us. Two of our top leaders are departing. Many of you have heard from Norman Drinkwater in the READY Committee. Norman has been our interim Vice Chancellor for Research and Graduate Education for the last year. He's going to serve probably another 4 or 5 months. We are in the midst of a search for a permanent person in this job, and we have candidates coming through at the end of February, early March. So hopefully, Norman will move towards retirement, and we will have a new person in that job, but he's done a great job, and I really appreciate his work. And then I think all of you here know Sarah Mangelsdorf, and hopefully heard her news as of the middle of December, which is that she has been hired as the new president at the University of Rochester. And I wish her well in that position. I know she's going to do a marvelous job, but after 5 years as provost, we will miss her. And we've got a provost search launched and hope to complete that by the end of this semester. I'd like to move straight into having a new provost if at all possible without a break and without appointing an interim. So that's some of the news happening around campus, and let me segue from that to talking about a few of the longer term things that we are working on. Maintaining and growing our academic excellence at UW-Madison requires investment revenue, and it requires using that investment revenue wisely. So I want to talk about 5 areas where we have some ambitious goals, and we're really putting some of our new resources to work, thinking strategically about how we continue to maintain and build our reputation and our results. So item number 1, goal number 1 here, maintain and further strengthen educational outcomes. We've made a lot of strides on this. I'm proud of where we are in educational outcomes, but there is more to be done, particularly in the very rapidly changing landscape of higher education. So those of you on the Education Committee saw these numbers earlier today. We've got some really great numbers and great outcomes to talk about. A retention rate of 95% plus, which is as good as it gets at these big public universities. Our time to degree is down to 4 years and 4 days. That's 4.01 years. My goal is to get that below 4. We have rising graduation rates and have been substantially closing the graduation gap between historically underrepresented groups and our other students. And one of the effects of all of these improvements as students are moving through faster, and we're doing more on the financial aid side, as I'll talk about in a minute, is that we're lowering student debt. More than half of our undergraduates, 53% this last year, graduated with 0 student debt, and I'm very proud of that as well, and want to keep moving that number up if I can as well. But there's more that we need to do, and let me just give you a flavor of some of the new educational opportunities that we are working on. 1, early start programs. This gives freshmen an opportunity to get a jump on their degree, or I say any incoming student, it could be transfer students as well, to start in the summer before when they would normally start. And it's particularly helpful for students who want to get through college fast, who for whatever reason want to complete in 3 years or less. And it's also helpful to students who may come to campus with less background and just want to acclimatize before 45,000 other students arrive on campus. And we often have international students, first-generation students, who feel that way. So we've created a number of early start programs in engineering. In the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, we're going to be expanding those, and we're launching the Wisconsin Experience Summer Launch Program for transfers and freshmen in the College of Letters and Science. Students will be earning 5 credits in the 8 weeks before the first semester starts, choosing from a list of courses, many of them online, but also gathering here on campus once or twice that fill common requirements. And it's really an orientation and a chance, as I say, to get an early start, to get a jump on what they're doing. Second program we're working on, gap year programs. As many of you know, an increased number of students are interested in taking a gap year, having some real life experiences before they come to college, as if college weren't real life, but we want to work with them on that, rather than have that happen outside the university, and a number of schools are doing this. The Wall Street Journal, I think, had an article on some program that Yale was running not long ago. Gap year programs essentially work with us, so students who want to do this apply, are admitted, and then apply into our gap year program. And our idea, at least starting, is that we will work with these students to find some international experience, an internship, an educational experience, a volunteer experience, given our many connections and other programs overseas. And our students will spend a year doing that. They may well get some credit for this if they set it up in the right way. We have online programs they could take. So, students who are ambitious and don't want this to slow down their time to degree may be able to do a gap year and also acquire enough credits in that first year so that in the next 3 years they could graduate on time if they want to. But it's a way to really integrate gap years into the curriculum. And then finally, a third thing we're working on, you've talked about this many times with the system, online degree programs and online offerings. We are gradually expanding our online offerings because they provide important flexibility for our traditional students who want to do internships or study abroad and still want to, fill in one of those general education requirements. But we're also looking very seriously at online degree programs aimed particularly at older adults who might have some number of college credits already, but not a degree. And we've been working with a consulting firm about what are our peers doing, what are the opportunities in this space, particularly in this region. And my hope by 2020 is that we might have one fully online undergraduate degree program aimed at non-traditional students. So you'll be hearing more about that. Just some of the things we're doing to expand and grow our educational opportunities. Goal number 2, accessibility. I've said this to you before. I want every student who can qualify for admission to UW-Madison to be able to afford to come. And there are a number of things we're doing here in reducing time to degree and expanding online courses, but let me talk specifically about affordability and financial aid. We've made really important progress towards this goal, thanks to both our Badger Promise program aimed at transfer students, first generation transfer students, and Buckys Tuition Promise, which I announced last spring. I'll say more about that in a minute. These programs create new pathways to UW-Madison and simplify the process, promise people up front what they can expect if they want to apply to UW-Madison and get in, so that sort of not left in the dark about, well, I could apply, but it's expensive. Am I going to get any help or not? Buckys Tuition Promise, which we just started this past year, provides 4 years of tuition support to students in Wisconsin low-income families. It's particularly in any family below the median of the income distribution. We started that at $56,000 this past year. So we this year have students from 65 counties, 65 out of the 72. About 17% of the freshmen, almost 800 students of our Wisconsin freshmen, are Buckys Tuition Promise students. And the program is doing exactly what I want. We're getting urban, rural, midtown, students from all over the state. Our biggest effort is to make sure people know about this, which they don't yet, right? And get it out to guidance counselors, get it to schools, get it to communities, so families know up front when their kids are sophomores or juniors. If you've got a student who's really a good student who ought to be coming to UW-Madison, we want to work with you to make this affordable. So I'm delighted to tell you that as we look at Buckys Tuition Promise for this year, we're raising our eligibility. No, I thought I had the number in there. We're going to go from $56,000 to $58,000. The income levels in Wisconsin did move up over the last several years, and we will move eligibility up with that. So I'm excited about this one and what it's accomplished. We've got a lot more to do. And you're going to hear tomorrow morning in the student spotlight from one of our freshman students who is a Buckys Tuition Promise student. To expand the number of students in these programs and to expand our student scholarship, we've got to continue growing our aid, our financial aid. And this chart sort of shows you what's happened to financial aid at UW-Madison. State dollars have been pretty flat. They're actually down a little over the last 7 years by at least a little bit. These are those HEAB dollars that you have asked for an increase in, which I very much thank you. Federal dollars have not grown. What has grown are our institutional dollars. where we've gone from about 21 million to 73 million in the last 10 years. That is due to a very serious effort on our part. We are redirecting some of our new tuition dollars from out-of-state students this way. As we've told you many times, 25% of those new tuition dollars go into financial aid. We have been doing a lot of work with our capital fundraising campaign to raise money for scholarships and been very successful on that front. And we've simply found ways to take money out of other parts of the university. So our athletic program gives us $5 to $7 million a year. The bulk of that goes into scholarships for non-athletes. So we're going to continue to work on expanding our institutional scholarship dollars, but the feds and the state have to be our partners in this. We cannot overcome those declines, and I appreciate the Board of Regent request at the state level to increase the HEAB scholarship dollars for low-income Wisconsin students. Thirdly, grow research strength. I'm not going to say a whole lot about this. Over the last 10 years, our research expenditures have lagged our peers, and we have fallen down the rankings somewhat. We're number 6 in the nation, but we were 2 and 3 10 years ago on a pretty regular basis. It doesn't take many years of growing at a slower rate, or even in some cases going backwards, which we did a couple of those years, to start falling down those rankings. And that means other schools have basically grown their research strength faster than we have, and we can't afford that given our long-term research reputation. So we're doing a number of things on this front. We're working to expand our federal research expenditures and seeing some real success on that front. Our faculty have brought in some record-setting grants. And our research has been featured in a whole number of places this last year: the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. That type of visibility matters when you're out there getting grants. We're providing better support for graduate students. If you want great faculty and you want great grants, you need to have the team that works on that, and graduate students are a very key part of that team. When I arrived, our graduate student stipends were at the bottom of the Big Ten. We are now just above the median, and that has taken real effort in a time of budget cuts. We had to prioritize that and get our graduate student support up. So we've raised stipends by 25% in the last 5 years. And then we're working on growing our industry partnerships, and we signed some wonderful industry, new major partnership agreements with GE Healthcare, with Johnson Controls, and with Foxconn over the, just this last fall. But there is always more work to be done, and we're going to work on our federal grants. We need to continue working on our industry partnerships as well. To accomplish these first 3 goals on education and accessibility and research, we have to have a foundation to make it possible. And the last 2 goals are about that foundation. First and most important is the superb faculty. The reputation and quality of the university rests on its faculty. So we've started a number of new programs aimed at building that long-term faculty strength. Last year, I told you something about our cluster hire program. This is a program that hires 3 or 4 faculty together in a key area of scientific interest that we think is going to grow and expand, where we want a bigger footprint than we have right now. It's often areas where we've got 2 or 3 faculty across the university, and 3 or 4 more will just really solidify who we are as a university and how we can approach that field and the sort of interdisciplinary grant proposals we can put together. We funded 10 clusters last year, covering a broad range of fields, from modern Arab politics to a precision medicine cluster, and we will continue funding 4 to 5 clusters a year over a 5-year period, which is going to lead to around 50, 60, 65 new faculty hired just in this cluster program in these really important areas of science, and that's going to be important for us. It could be transformative in some of these areas. Another program we're running is what we call our Targets of Opportunity program. You all know that this is a state that sometimes struggles with diversity, right? And certainly our faculty are not as diverse as the faculty in many other states that have greater natural demographic diversity in them. One of the things we're doing on this is we have just launched a program, Targets of Opportunity Top, which gives departments a lot more support and a number of new tools to go after faculty who are underrepresented in their field. And the department puts a proposal into us. They have to argue why this faculty member is from an underrepresented group. It could be a woman. It could be someone who's ethnically more diverse. It could be someone with a certain type of perspective on the field that is quite unusual. We have made a number of outstanding new hires already with this program. We have 30 more recruitments in the works. We won't get all of those people, but if we run this program for the next several years, I am quite confident that I will be able to stand up in front of you in 3 or 4 years and say, we have a more diverse faculty. And then I'll say, and we've got to do better yet, but we're getting there. You all know, and every one of my fellow chancellors can echo this, is our biggest problem in terms of building faculty strength is our lack of competitive pay. Our full professors are more than 10% below the median of our peers. That's actually the Big Ten number. It doesn't include any of the private schools that come recruiting on our place. And we're at the bottom of that peer group. We are in number 14 of the 14 Big Ten schools. We can't afford to be there. That does not reflect our reputation and our strength. The 2% pay increases this past year just kept us from falling further behind, and I deeply appreciate them, but they didn't help us catch up. To bring all UW-Madison faculty to the median of our peer group will cost us almost $22 million, and that doesn't include any staff pay increases. That's faculty only. The decline in faculty compensation has been one of the reasons why our U.S. News and World Report rankings have fallen. Faculty compensation has fallen way down relative to other schools, and that is a major factor in those rankings. So I'm delighted with the proposed 3% pay increase each year that the Regents have asked for. But that raise is also about what our peers are going to be giving their faculty in those years. And it still is not going to help us catch up in the way we need to. And you've heard this, and I know many of you have said it. At some point, we're going to need funds for a larger pay catch-up program than we have received so far. Lastly, last goal here, all of this requires financial stability. And we've worked really hard on this. Some of you saw Loren Heller's presentation this morning. For the last 4 years, we've been working on a variety of different fronts to be entrepreneurial, to expand our investment revenues that leverage state dollars even more effectively than we had in the past. And the things I've told you about, cluster hires, the top program, Bucky's tuition promise, looking at expansions of online programs, all of those have been funded out of dollars that we have generated in recent years by expanding our summer session, increasing out-of-state tuition, our fundraising campaign, some moderate increases in class size. All of that is what's driving these new investment dollars. Some of you have seen this chart before. I've showed it to you every year for the last couple of years. As you can see, we actually went down for 2 years in a row in terms of our overall revenue growth. There is no other university we've been able to find among our peer schools that experienced a decline in revenue. Some of them grew more slowly over some years. But that really set us backwards. And we're now growing faster again, but 4.2% is about the rate at which our peer schools are growing. We want to catch up. We want to expand that rate of growth for several years, do a little bit more catch up. And the state has an important role to play in that, right? It provides 14% of our revenues, almost all of which go into funding for the educational side of the university. So I thank the Regents for their budget request on that front. The state has to be our partner if we're going to maintain our strength as a strong public institution. And I should note, our capital budget is also important. I just happen to have a slide that shows the new vet med school. And that, of course, is one of our top priorities on the capital campaign. Many of you have toured that school. You've heard our dean, Mark Markell, has indicated to you exactly why we need this. To only use one of his talking points, this facility has a animal hospital in it. It was designed for 12,000 patients a year. It's currently serving 27,000. We just need some expansion and renovation of this facility. We also have a good number of program revenue projects on the list. All of those are projects where we have the funds, where we need to move forward. They are projects that have to be done on campus, and I'm very much hoping that we can find ways to move program revenue forward in as flexible a way as possible. You've talked about that many times. I won't take you through it again. Let me end with one example, which is what we're doing in the area of computer and data science. And we are hoping to announce some new initiatives in this area, so watch this space. Let me give you the background. Computer science is now our largest major. When I arrived on this campus, we had 300 computer science majors. Now, we all knew that was going to grow over time. What I didn't expect and I'm shocked at is we went from 300 in 5 years to 1,600 and growing. It's a huge growth in that department. Hard to meet demand. We brought in 8 new faculty in the last 2 years, but we've essentially given them unbounded hiring authority. You know, whoever they can find that they want, they should go after. We've added money to the budget for expanding CS teaching assistants, but we need to do more and to be more strategic about our presence in the whole area of computer and data science. I asked a group of faculty and alumni to look at what we need to do at UW-Madison to expand our education and our research programs, to grow our reputation and our visibility. Our computer science program was a top 5 program back in the 60s and 70s. Now, given what happened on the coast, virtually all Western programs fell down the rankings some. I think we're now number 13, and we don't want to fall any further. I would love to push us up a little. So what do we have to do that? We're discussing 2 things. One is a reorganization that will bring together some of the computer, data, and information-related fields to enhance education and research and to create some new opportunities for collaboration. And people are talking about that inside the College of Letters and Sciences, which is where these programs exist. We're already working to create a new undergraduate major in data science to supplement the computer science major, and working on ways to expand access to computer and data science educational programming to those who may not major in the field, but who want exposure and some training in it. Secondly, we're imagining how to create a new data science institute, one of our new big cross-university research institutes that reports to our Vice Chancellor for Research, which would bring together faculty from every program. And there's not a program on campus that isn't increasingly working with big data and data science, whether you're looking at the humanities or the medical school. And we need to find ways to bring those faculty into closer collaboration and create more conversation. So we're in conversations with the faculty about what we can do in these areas, how these new structures might work, and how they get put together. But doing this right means both managing the changes, but it also means raising the funds to support them. And again, we need the state involved in that. The capacity building initiative that you have asked for money is, among other things, at Madison campus, going to be supporting some of these expansions in computer science. And it is really important that we find some of those dollars as leverage to the dollars we're putting in and the dollars we're trying to solicit from some of our alumni. If we're successful, we can raise the national visibility of our data and information science programs and position UW-Madison even better than it is right now to compete for top federal and foundation grants, enable us to recruit top faculty and students, and give us new ways to work with industry partners who are very interested in this field. So, you know, the key to a strong future is investing in the right areas. For too many years, we were essentially standing still, if not moving backwards, partly because of reduced budgets. We have turned that around thanks to the state, thanks to our alumni, and thanks to the very hard work of a lot of our faculty and staff. Our peers are investing, and it's a pretty competitive field out there in higher education. If we're to maintain our reputation and our quality, we need to invest as well. How important is this? Let me quote one of my favorite U.S. political figures, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He said, if you want to create a great city, and I would say a great state as well, first create a great university, and then wait 100 years. The citizens of our state have been investing in UW-Madison for 171 years, and we need to continue that commitment. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Regents, any questions for Chancellor Blank? Seeing none, that was a tremendous presentation. Thank you so much, Chancellor.
I will call attention to the fact you have a copy of our budget and brief. It's my favorite publication, and in 14 easy-colored pages, you can find out anything you want to know about our revenue inflows and our expenditure outflows. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chancellor. Moving on to item number 4 on the agenda, we'll now have a presentation on proposed facility repair and renovation. This is an important issue for all of our campuses across the system. Recognizing that, this board approved a significant capital request as part of our recent budget request. To lead today's presentation is Associate Vice President Alex Rowe. Alex, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. It's a little daunting to follow along behind Chancellor Blank's great ideas with something a little less exciting. So, to repair and renovate, it means replacing end-of-life building systems and exterior envelope components, investing in programmatic improvements, and of course, addressing deferred maintenance needs. Our buildings require ongoing maintenance, care, and upkeep. Since teaching, learning, and research aren't static activities, functional upgrades are necessary for our institutions to stay current with pedagogical changes and to incorporate new technology. Renovation and repair projects must take into consideration the type of construction that was prevalent in the development of the university. So the University of Wisconsin system, like many of its peers, saw an unprecedented spike in construction following the return of our GIs from the war, AKA the post-war era. These facilities went up fast to keep pace with the increased enrollment many institutions faced at the time. Oh, and energy conservation was not a factor in those years. Oil was cheap and seemingly plentiful. These buildings were not meant to last. And although the average percentage across higher education in this category is closer to 33% of the total inventory, we estimate that more than half of our facilities were built in this era. The slide on the screen represents data collected by a facilities and space assessment firm, Sightlines, that works throughout higher education and at more than 360 campuses. Their most recent publication displays the various types of construction as eras and the amount of space added over the last 135 years. The primary drivers for the two largest growth periods in higher educational facilities are enrollment growth and program amenity growth. However, experts predict that a new larger wave is coming, and it's focused on investment needs. Building upon Associate Vice Chancellor for Facilities Planning and Management at UW-Madison, David Darling's presentation this morning in the Capital Budget and Planning Committee, building systems don't last forever. They require cyclical maintenance and eventual replacement. Here, Sightlines recommends that major building systems be replaced somewhere between every 25 to 35 years, and we concur. Many of our buildings constructed in the 1950s and 70s have never had their electrical, HVAC, plumbing, or exterior envelope replaced or repaired. In addition, one thing not factored into a typical renewal program is the probability that newer buildings, which have computerized systems and controls, will be requiring upgrade and replacement on a more frequent basis than older systems. If you take a look at the graphic to the far right of the slide, one can see the replacement pattern of older buildings, categorized as first wave life cycles. And remember, I said we didn't do some of that replacement. And newer buildings that came online after 2000, categorized as second wave life cycles. In the dotted box, one can see the intersection of the two life cycles, which is going to be a serious challenge for our institutions starting in the very near future, which results in what experts are predicting as the next wave. As I've mentioned before, our physical plant staff has had to maintain a combination of older facilities that require one kind of skill set, yet at the same time, staff are managing an ever-increasing complexity of electronic systems that keep our life safety, heating, and cooling infrastructure operational. They are well aware of the myriad of challenges and problems of the building systems they maintain. They know where the issues are and how to fix them. What they lack is sufficient capital and operational funds to keep up with the demands of either an aging infrastructure or a very complex set of systems that increasingly requires them to outsource preventive maintenance due to the lack of qualified workers. Several biennia of operational budget cuts have reduced the available staff our physical plant directors oversee. In addition, we are increasingly unable to compete salary-wise with the private sector, and it's getting more and more difficult in a low unemployment environment to find and keep qualified staff. More and more they are called upon to take care of emergency problems, such as the ongoing plumbing failures that plague our high-rise residential facilities in Eau Claire and Milwaukee, which we do have construction problems in place to fix. This diverts their manpower from doing routine preventative maintenance activities. Each of our UW system institutions have similar stories to share. What I want to emphasize is that facility staff are not doing their job. And in fact, as reported by the Educational Advisory Board, and I quote, "Far from neglecting the physical plant, facilities leaders have taken on the responsibility of stretching a shrinking operation budget farther and farther," end quote. It's not just universities that are facing this challenge, hospitals, large complex campuses. And as a point of reference, former Regent Style, now Congressman Style's new workplace, the U.S. Capitol, recently announced that they have 18.4 million square feet, 190 structures, and 580 acres of land. And there's over $1 billion of deferred maintenance. This legislative and high court campus is smaller than UW-Madison. As many of you are aware, we did not receive any all-agency general fund supported borrowing in FY 15-17 that would have financed efforts to repair and renovate. As a result, we had to concentrate and redirect the limited funding we had left, as well as future funding, into prioritized categories. If the project dealt with code compliance, failing systems, building envelope, critical functions, programs, it could go forward. But if you wanted funding to replace the roof on the Chancellor's house, we said no. We debated funding programmatic upgrades to a police station. In the end, that project went forward. Every project is scrutinized to ensure it meets the criteria in order to get access to the limited funding that is available. We have collected a series of photographs from UW institutions to demonstrate some of the challenges that they face in their day-to-day work. And I'd like to emphasize that none of these pictures are from the events of last week. So could you start the video, please? Standing water on rooftops, degraded roofing shingles, more water on rooftops. That's raining inside a heating plant. Interior water damage. Concrete spalling. Cardboard vent covers. Eroded exterior envelopes. Spalling bricks due to moisture penetration. More spalling masonry. Concrete erosion. Exposed rebar due to concrete erosion. That's not a good place. Loading dock and retaining wall degradation. A flooded loading dock. Exposed rebar on stairs. Soil erosion adjacent to outdoor athletic. Soil erosion next to a road. Water damage at the juncture of two buildings in a basement. That's an interior tunnel roof. Supports for a very large water softener tank. Underground utility pit. That's what a burst steam pipe looks like. Flooded basement room. Water in an air intake and filter bay. Corroded electrical panel. Electrical junction box. That's what old telecom panels used to look like. Electrical switchgear. Damaged concrete and underground utilities. More structural column damage. The underside of a pit. Pool basin stairs. That's the pool basin wall on the outside. Next to the mechanical room, we have closed that pool. Old theater lighting. Interior shots of water and flood damage after a rain event. Again, this is not last week. Old corroded lab setting. deteriorated foundation, deteriorated agriculture and research stations, failing or no longer functional equipment in our agriculture and research areas. And last but not least, vacated animal facilities due to unsafe condition. This building has been closed. So we appreciate that this board has already given support for our FY 19-21 budget request to finance the necessary repair and renovation activities across the UW system. It's important for us that this remains a high priority. We can't afford to keep kicking this issue down the road. And as it has a negative impact in our operational activities by diverting resources, people, and funding to keep our institutions safe and fully functional. And the longer we delay renewal activities, the more expensive these projects will become. The best course for us is to address our needs is with consistent funding. And as I mentioned at the August 2018 Regent meeting, this capital request only impacts about 8.44% of our nearly 62 million gross square feet. And in our $1.9 billion FY 19-21 capital budget request, of the 29 projects, 25 of them are renewal, renovation, replacement projects, or mostly about 1.8 billion of the total. So that capital budget request is nearly all repair, renovation, replacement. So to reiterate, as Associate Vice Chancellor David Darling did this morning, our UW institutions work diligently to ensure that our facilities are safe, secure, and provide the necessary living, learning, and research spaces our faculty and students require. They need the resources necessary to keep us operational so that our physical plan is not negatively impacting the quality of the educational process, nor the safety of our students, faculty, and staff. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Regent Milner.
I've visited many of the campuses, and the first thing I want to say is I want to compliment the campuses. I've traveled into these old buildings. I want to compliment the campuses for what they've done with the facilities regarding cleanliness and basic repairs. But what we saw up there is the internals, and there is no way you can manage those internals by basic repair and cleanliness. So and also what I've heard from traveling candidates and traveling persons who have gone to other outstate campuses is they marvel at how well we've been able to maintain our facilities, considering their ages. But what we are seeing is you cannot maintain the facilities. The basic structure and the basic HVAC are not being repaired and maintained in place. This is critical for what we have to do with our mission. So thank you very much for this report. It's a little daunting.
Thank you, Regent Milner. Other questions? Regent Mueller.
Mr. President, and thank you, Alex, although we are all sufficiently deflated.
Sorry about that. I should have gone before, Chancellor.
My question relates specifically to the two-year campuses, which are now branch campuses of the receiving institutions. And as I understand it, the county would pay for some construction costs and maintenance costs. Can you just tell us where we are now with county funding for those two-year schools, and if that is still available to help there?
So as you alluded to, we don't own any of that, of those buildings. The counties, either county or city government has come together to build all those buildings. And the current operational methodology at the moment is that we do some maintenance on them. We obviously pay for our operational impacts. We provide all the equipment inside there of those buildings. We have provided that consistently through the system. But we do not provide any construction dollars, any renovation dollars, any of those. Those have been largely managed through our counties and governments, and they have been fabulous partners. At the moment, for policy reasons, we're going to maintain that. as you just saw from the pictures, the 13 institutions that we have significant issues we have to address. And I think that the way that we're going forward now, correct me if I'm wrong, President, is we are going to keep the existing operational components in place, which is we'll continue to provide the equipment, we'll continue to do energy conservation activities there, we'll continue to operate there, but that the upkeep in terms of if you had to make a facility renewal, a capital improvement, would continue to be done at the local level, as we do not own those buildings. And there is some challenge that if the building commission has not approved the acquisition or the building of those buildings, that they might not be willing to approve the use of state funds anyway. So there'd be issues we'd have to work through. But currently, we're keeping the status quo.
Thank you, Regent Mueller. Thank you, Alex. Regent Delgado.
Yes, Alex, I get the impression, and I have discussed this with you, that the buildings that we built in the 50s and 60s were designed with a chronic sense of cheapness. And so if you agree with that, and particularly the buildings that we just kept adding on, more like a, are the new buildings we're building keeping in mind long-term maintenance as part of design, or are we just continuing the plan that let's stretch the dollars in some
We do, and our institutions in particular, the facilities staff are a more conservative lot, say, than I might be. Want to make sure that we build whatever we can to maintain. One of our challenges, though, however, Regent Delgado, is that the new electronic systems, their obsolescence is a much quicker cycle, right, than say a valve or a belt type situation. And so the renovation, repair, and upgrade system now is much quicker. So your exterior envelope might have the same lifespan as a building from the 50s to the 70s, but the interior, our fire alarm systems, our HVAC control systems, everybody wants electronic. They want to be able to do it from your iPad. Those systems do not have the same longevity that some of our older electronic systems have, and that's why we talk about this sort of convergence. This is coming. Not only do we have to take care of the buildings that were not built super well, but we're seeing now the need to upgrade a building that may only be 15 years old in its systems. And I think, that's been a bit of a shock to not just us, but to all owners across that do this sort of work. I wish that electrical systems lasted forever, but I keep being told by the engineers they don't.
I guess I'm more concerned with the concrete and the steel, that the electronics, I assume that the electronics is going to be replaced fast.
We do everything we can to ensure that we buy a high quality product and work with DOA on that. And I think those are conversations we have to continue to make sure that they build us a product that we expect them to build. Yeah.
Regents, other questions for Alex? Regent Jones.
Thanks, Alex. I guess my question on the branch campuses is more qualitative. It's kind of what kind of shape are they in? Does it run the gamut, or are they all in pretty good shape? Something like that.
I couldn't answer that fully. I can say that some of them are newer than others, so I think it depends upon the institution. And I know that each of the receiving institutions have spent quite a bit of time out assessing the state of things. They have a list of things they want to deal with. We've been directing them to local governments. So, in the case of, say, UW-Fox Valley, those are some newer buildings, right? So they're a little better shape than maybe some of the older ones. So I have, each of those receiving institutions is taking the time now as they absorb them. We've already sort of taken over the operations. The receiving institutions have already taken over operations of the branch campuses. So I think we'll start to see more of that. We didn't allow that in this last capital budget in 1921, but I think we'll probably have more of a conversation as we go forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Regent Jones. Regent Peterson.
Alex, thank you for the presentation. Very impactful. Certainly for our new regents, I think they get a good sense for all the deferred maintenance that we are experiencing. You went to some lengths to talk about all of the demonstrated areas that need remediation were not of the last several weeks. Can you talk a little bit about how that process works, where you have emergency repairs, and how that plays into capital budgeting on the campuses, because it is somewhat acute and immediate? Just give us a sense of how that works.
So as part of the all-agency budgetary process, the state sends us a memo saying how much money we get. In this last biennium, we asked for $100 million, and the Department of Administration gave us a letter that said, you have $101 million, of which $80 million of that is for all agency, 20 went to the heating plant program. we set aside a certain amount of those dollars for what we call smalls, which are 0 to 300,000. We've already blown through that collection of money, and we're now about to blow through the second collection of money. And so generally, if a campus has an emergency, the Department of Administration has a process by which they can come in and apply to get access to those dollars. Sadly, that all-agency pot is diminishing every day. We had set aside, I think, 10 million. We've already gone through that 10 million. And now we're working on another set of 5 million, which takes away from bigger projects. So that's why we have prioritized the other category. Why I talked about the house roof, that actually happened. And so we're trying desperately to keep money in that pot so that, you know, if something comes up and a fan shuts down, we had a chimney at a heating plant that was failing. You can't turn the heating plant on if the chimney is not in a certain condition. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that our campuses can stay open through that pot of money. So it's an everyday conversation.
Thank you, Regent Peterson. Regents, other questions? If not, the one thing that stands out to me is, in addition to these issues, there are a number of questions about our two-year campuses. So I think perhaps President Cross and I will have ask Alex and her team to do some research and come back at a future meeting and give us an update on the two-year schools as well. Thank you, Alex. Very well done. Let's give Alex a round of applause for her hard work. Turning to our next agenda item, the Sexual Violence and Harassment Priorities Working Group has completed its review of UW system policies and practice related to sexual harassment and sexual violence. Dr. Shanita Brokenburr, along with Quinn Williams, co-chaired this effort. Dr. Brokenburr is joined today by Green Bay Assistant Vice Chancellor Christopher Burkett to present the group's findings and recommendations. Good afternoon, Chris and Shanita.
Good afternoon. This is a report of findings for the President's Sexual Violence and Harassment Priorities Working Group. The executive sponsors for this working group are myself and Quinn Williams, General Counsel. The working group chair is Christopher Paquette, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Policy and Compliance at UW Green Bay. As background, in 2016, the original UW System Task Force on Sexual Violence and Harassment delivered 2 overarching mandates with regard to Title IX. The first was to review, revise, and ensure campus compliance with Regent Policy Document 14.2, Sexual Violence and Sexual Harassment, and Regent Policy Document 14.8, Consensual relationships. The task force also mandated training for employees and students on preventing sexual harassment and sexual violence. A report of progress towards compliance with the 2016 mandates are as follows: 100% compliance at the campus level with policy revisions and implementation of RPD 14.2 and 14.8, mandatory training on preventing sexual harassment. In terms of where we are, we have 100% of employees across the system completing training and 86% of students across the system completing training. Please note that in 2019, compliance with the mandatory training will be a requirement for pay plan eligibility for all employees of the UW system. This slide shows student training completion rates by institution. Overall, these completion rates are very high, with notables UW-Madison, UW-Stout, UW-Milwaukee, UW-Oshkosh, UW-River Falls, and UW-Stevens Point. As a follow-up to our 2016 efforts, In 2018, President Cross established the President's Sexual Violence and Harassment Priorities Working Group and charged the working group with assessing how we're measuring up against our goals. In doing so, our charge was to conduct a current state assessment of Title IX activities across the UW system, with the areas of review focusing on an audit of institutional Title IX policies, a recommendation for advanced training curriculum, a review of current technology used for record keeping and data collection, and lastly, a review of best and most common practices. The working group was comprised of 11 members representing 9 UW institutions who volunteered their time, talent, and expertise to this effort. To ensure diversity in terms of subject matter expertise, membership included representatives from Human Resources, Title IX, Student Affairs, and Equity and Diversity. Our consulting partner for this effort was Internal Audit. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Christopher Paquette, who is to be commended for the excellent work and very heavy lift with the working group.
Thank you, Dr. Brokenberg. As we started, the initial piece was to examine policies 14.2 and 14.8. 14.2 is sexual misconduct policy, and 14.8 is the consensual relationship policy. We went through each institution's published policy. As Dr. Brokenberg has pointed out in prior meetings, there was 100% compliance with the implementation of those policies on the institutional, as institutional policy. We found an extreme amount of commonality throughout all of those institutional policies. And so it seems to be that everybody is very much using the same definitions, the same process. What is unique within each institution is the who is doing the work. So the primary recommendation was that all institutions maintain that compliance with 14.2 and 14.8 with maximum implementation of that policy as their institutional policy, but also set aside a separate Title IX statement which identifies things such as campus resources, campus reporting systems, regional resources such as local law enforcement, local sexual assault centers, and other resources that are available to individuals who may be the victim of sexual misconduct on campuses. The second piece that we looked at was an advanced training curriculum. This goes beyond what is already mandated to all employees. We are talking about individuals who actually are what I would call practitioners of Title IX, insofar as these are the individuals on campus who are responsible for responding to Title IX complaints and incident reports of sexual misconduct. Again, a tremendous amount of commonality between the institutions as to what advanced training, what additional training was sought and being provided to those practitioners. Trauma-informed consent, VAWA, violence against women, crimes and responses, UW-17, which is the non-academic misconduct administrative code that addresses how we have to deal at the institutions with non-academic misconduct, which sexual misconduct will be part of that. Those are all areas where training is needed and being applied individually by each campus right now. The individuals who then need that are your Title IX coordinators, your co-coordinators, dean of students, judicial conduct officers, hearing committee personnel, investigators, and then to the more functional individuals, res life assistants and staff, coaches, and law enforcement. Again, institutions are providing this right now, but not at a level that any one of them at least indicated that they would want to. Everybody had a desire to have a higher level of this. There are some institutions that are doing a tremendous job providing this in-house. There are other institutions that, I will speak anecdotally, our institution, it's very difficult to get all of those people away from their normal functions in order to take a half-a-day training. Resources are a problem, so coming up with some module that between Office of General Counsel in compliance can kind of put a stamp of approval and say, these are the ones you should be doing. Not necessarily the individual trainings, but somewhat of a module to do so. The next thing we looked at is what the workflow is for each campus, from the receipt of the incident report through the disposition and the close. Now, if you look at the actual report, attachment C and D, that has far more detail than what you see on the slide in front of you. That is what I would again call a practitioner's flowchart. Somebody who's involved in Title IX, either from the student conduct or from employee conduct, will be able to see that and see all of the different flows. But the key component, and I think the recommendation of the group, is that there be a central clearing for all incident reports on campus. So incident reports can come from any area on campus. They can come from faculty, they can come from student affairs, they can come from employees, they can come from the public. Get those reports into one single area that they can be assessed as to what the appropriate response would be and what the required response would be. And that's going to be the variances that you see in attachments C and D. What does the complainant want? What do we feel we have to do as an institution to protect our students and our employees? Are there any other actions that we feel we need to be taking? Then it would either, if no formal process is required, could move immediately to disposition. If some formal process, either a judicial, disciplinary, some other referral, external or internal, would be necessary, but we can move it strictly down that line. Another key component that I think, again, was very uniform throughout the institutions in our discussions were that there is some notification to higher administration, whomever that institution determines that to be, when there's a particular matter that may draw external attention, which is significant, and the institutions all seem to have, albeit in some cases informally, some process that they use. So the recommendation is that basically these 5 steps are included in any workflow being implemented on the campuses, including that very important step of notifying high-level administration in the event that the case warrants notification, be that the chancellor, be that the vice chancellor of student affairs, however that institution makes that decision, but that some notification is leaving the Title IX system, so there's that additional information being provided. Finally, well, not finally, but there's the record keeping and data collection and technology. One thing that we found, again, very common is the use of the Maxient system, but that's not universal. Several other institutions have placed a good deal of time and effort and financial resources into developing their own data collection. What I think the work group found to be important is that some method of data collection exists to create audit trails, to make sure that that can be referenced in the future if necessary to determine how any individual case was handled, or in the aggregate, how the institution was responding at that particular time. Again, with the development of the consistent workflow process, that would give assistance to making sure when that information gets added into that database. So again, we want to talk about making sure that at least the recommendation will be making sure that everybody is using this, and disposing of the case is a key component to make sure that there is a closure to that case where we say, okay, now this is a recordable incident and it will go into this bucket. We also talked about making sure we have some commonality in some investigative processes, and again, the very important piece of notification to the chancellor or some higher level administration when a matter could could have some significance to make sure that that notification is provided. As far as examining the best practices of Title IX, again, these are standards that are uniform throughout the institutions because we do receive similar training, but I don't think they've ever been necessarily articulated in a way of best practices. Title IX best practice is to have a complainant-driven system that is a little bit different than, for example, a criminal justice or something of that nature, whereas the prosecutor or law enforcement may drive the investigation a little bit more. Here, the best recommendation is to allow that complaining victim to make determinations of how he or she wants to proceed with this. Documentation, of course, is always important, creating that audit trail when the Office of Civil Rights Compliance comes around from the DOE. You want to make sure that you can produce every step of the way in consistently documented forms. Informing both the complainant and respondent, as is required under UWS 17, of the rights and resources available to them anytime a Title IX matter is opened up, making sure that those resources are afforded equally to both the complainant and the respondent, and make sure that they're aware of all of their rights and the other resources that are available both on campus and within the community. Again, talking about some of the interim protections that could be made, I'll allow General Counsel Williams to address the potential changes in some of that based on the recommendations that are going to rulemaking right now. But again, taking steps to make sure accommodations are made for both the complainant and the respondent insofar as looking at that. Again, that slide to a certain extent speaks for itself. We have to remember that Title IX is a institutional obligation. It's our obligation to the complainant to make sure that it's all individuals are treated equally, fairly, and that we are applying identical procedures to all individuals. So a summary of some of the high points of the recommendation. One thing the group was pretty unanimous on, well, I shouldn't say pretty unanimous, they were unanimous, and having a consistent definition of what defines a student that is required to take the training. Our recommendation is for first-year students are required to take the mandatory training. And the reason for that is that students do transfer to institutions. Some students will not return from semester to semester, making sure that we're defining a student narrowly so it's not an individual who's taking one online course, that we are looking at students who are matriculating into the institutions in their first year and making sure that they are in that space. Requiring the advanced training for the designated personnel, making sure that all designated personnel on the campuses are receiving that, and ensuring that uniform workflow, that at least those 5 major components are being hit, and then finally identifying and adopting some technological solution for data collection.
Thank you. Board members, questions for Shanita or Christopher? Regent Atwell.
Thank you. I realize that the presentation was with respect to Title IX protocol on our campuses, but pardon me if I should know this, but I'm unclear on where and when and how and who makes a determination to refer matters to criminal authorities, because the civil jurisdiction has a role to play here, and I'm just not sure where Title IX intersects with civil action.
Good question, and for that one, I'm going to refer to our General Counsel, Quinn Williams. Quinn, can you help us out?
Sure, and so Regent Atwell, is your question about at what point could potential criminal referrals occur as part of a Title IX process? Usually it's up to the complainant to approach law enforcement for a referral. We have FERPA regulations that will prevent us from going and reaching out to law enforcement.
Regents, other questions? Regent Bechtel.
Yeah, I want to thank you for this report. It's very important, obviously a very sensitive and timely topic. These policies are very important, but you know, compliance is probably more critical as we move forward. We have a responsibility to provide a safe campus, obviously all of us do, for their students, staff, and visitors. Now that you've done this work, which really focused on the policies, but as you did that, you were talking directly with the campuses, the Title IX officers, et cetera. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. What do you see as the greatest challenges going forward, or vulnerabilities? I mean, we're going to be reviewing this, I think, on an ongoing basis, so are there some metrics or some things that we should be looking for now that we have the policy set, the training, now we're moving forward?
Well, I mean, I would ask again General Counsel Williams to step in. One of the provisions that's being suggested right now is the safe harbor provision that will make Title IX enforcement through the Office of Civil Rights Compliance equal to that of the current civil litigation standard as set forth by the Supreme Court.
Right.
So as we ensure that things are as uniform as they possibly can be throughout all of the institutions within the UW system, that's going to afford greater protection for those safe harbors. It's going to assist the Office of General Counsel in being able to confidently respond to those things, understanding that everybody is applying with the nuances that certainly need to be afforded on the individual institutions, the same policies and procedures. And so that will be one of the things that I think this would be in direct response to, at least in that anticipation. And even if it doesn't happen, that's still best practice to make sure that when the individuals who may have to deal with this in the future are able to confidently respond and say, yes, this is UWGB policy, yes, this is UW Platteville's policy.
Thank you, Christopher. I know President Cross would like to help in responding to that question as well. President Cross.
I'll try, because in many cases we're going to be surprised, but I think our biggest challenge is how to propagate a culture where this isn't prominent. And we can develop all kinds of policies and mechanisms to evaluate and measure the implementation of those, but if we haven't changed the culture, we're reacting, not being proactive. So one of the reasons you're going to hear about this a lot at the board is because it's important that the board in this venue articulate its desire to change this culture, not just the administration. In this public venue, we are saying this has got to stop. And we're paying a lot of attention to the policy and to the implementation process, but the fact that we're going to be talking about it a lot hopefully helps people understand such behavior is unacceptable. The second challenge we face is what Regent Atwell was, I think, in some ways getting at is campus discipline, the right to discipline students through a judicial process that allows for due process on a campus. This kind of behavior can creep over into the criminal side, which is a distinctly different area, and yet they overlap. And the confusion on the part of public, as it's expressed right now in the rulemaking process, it was discussed, so much of the language now is attempting to create a criminal process on our campus, not a campus disciplinary judicial process. And those are distinctly different. And the public doesn't always understand that, and how do we best deal with that as part of our challenge as well?
Thank you, President Cross. Regent Ring.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your work on this matter. One question I have, relates to the recommendations that the working made regarding student course. I'm more curious, are you recommending it be required in order to graduate, or is it just a requirement that they just have to take it? Or?
Well, I think if I may ask a clarifying question on that, are you aware the course isn't necessarily a course, it's a 45-minute module that they have to take online?
Right, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So different methods of getting compliance have been discussed. In this most recent round, some campuses went so far as to not make it a graduation requirement, but placed upon the students the inability to access their SIS account for non-compliance. I think those will be some institution that has, I think those decisions are institutional decisions, but there are some, much like with the employees not making you eligible for pay plan, there needs to be some ability to compel compliance.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Regent Mueller.
Thank you, and again, thank you for your work. There's an emphasis on data collection and reporting, but my question is, when and even if will the Regents and the public see a count of the incidents of sexual violence and sexual harassment by campus?
Well, again, I can answer that question to the best of my ability. There are some difficulties in getting that information for some of the reasons that we put forward in our report, which is how are campuses defining an incident report when it comes to sexual assault. Some campuses say any report that comes in, and you have to keep in mind that I shouldn't say, but one of the things that should be noted is that incident reports are to be formalized into a sexual misconduct report or any incident that occurred during the student's college years or that is reported during the student's college years. So it may be an incident that they're reporting that occurred at a different location, at a different time, and because they're reporting it to university personnel, that university personnel does put that through the Title IX process to ensure that that individual receives resources and that we're treating all reporters the same. So one of the things that we tried to emphasize in the report is if we can get some uniform reporting standards of what it is that the Office of General Counsel would like to see, what it is that we are actually reporting from a campus basis, I think that would go a long way to responding to your question, that if we had, I used the term, I think, when I was speaking with the General Counsel yesterday, kind of a glossary of this is what needs to be reported, this response is what needs to happen. So,
thank you. Regent Mueller.
Well, thank you. I just have to say, again, thank you for your hard work, but that's somewhat disappointing for the Regents and for the public to not be able to know anything about these incidents. It just seems like it's not going to be able to happen because we'll not have consistent definitions. We'll be judging campuses unfairly. Or am I wrong? Are there some uniform data reports required now?
President Cross, could you speak to this for us?
Yes, we can provide you with that data. I think what we're saying is that there's inconsistency in definitions and terms. Even now, the state defines some of this differently than the federal government. So we have to report different things under the Clery Act, et cetera, than we would to the state, and it gets very confusing. And
Mike?
I was going to say, anything else, President Cross?
I was just going to add that that's what we hope to get clarified in this process, so there's consistency.
Thank you.
Chancellor Blank.
I just want to note that we all put out annual reports as required under federal clearing law of the number of sexual harassment reports that we receive. As noted, it's hard to interpret some of those at times. There may be some double counting that may be in the work on our campus, but you can get an annual report from any one of our campuses
Thank you, Chancellor. Regent Whitburn.
I'd like to drill down just a little bit on where we are procedurally. In December of 17, you, President Cross, promulgated memorandum out to the campuses enunciating best practices. We don't have a Regent policy, correct?
We do have Regent policy. 14,
we have
these two policies, 14, what is it, 14.2?
14.2 and 14.8.
So this is next step.
Yeah, this is improving that.
What concerned me about the report was the conclusion that said the working group has set forth the above recommendations but stopped short of articulating any specific plans for the operationalization of the recommendations. So we're not being asked to accept today and expect these particular recommendations will be implemented. I take it they will come to you, and then you will decide what we're going to do, and then importantly, who's going to do them, and then also importantly, when they're going to be in the done pile. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there's 4 basic recommendations. Some of those have already been done, the Title IX work where they have to make a statement. The uniform reporting process, I think we're pretty close on that. The recommendation about data collection, which is exposed at this, so there's consistency, that's going to take a little longer. So yes, we're working on these now. We just wanted you to be aware that these are things that would improve how we implement these 2 policies we adopted.
I just think because of the sensitivity to this subject and the public awareness and our collective concern that that we have follow-up and we know where we are with regard to things that have been specified.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Thank you.
That's why we want to bring it back. Where are we on this?
Thank you, Regent Whitburn. Regent Taylor.
I just have a point of clarification. When you were talking about the required training, you defined a student as a freshman. And I'm looking at the language here that says a student is defined as a freshman or a first-year student. Are we considering transfer students as first-year students?
I apologize if I used the term freshman. I shouldn't have done that. It's for first-year students, and then the further recommendation was that any first-year student at the institution who had not already taken the prescribed module. So if it would be a transfer between UW institutions, that student would not be required, but if it was a transfer from outside of the UW institution, then that would be a requirement.
Thank you, Regent Taylor. Regent Hall.
How do we compare to other systems in terms of, policies and practices on sexual violence and harassment?
President Cross, can you help us with this one?
Well, I may also defer to Shanita. Regent policy 14-2, I think, is one of the best policies in the country from my perspective. It's really well done. They spent a couple of years developing that, at least 18 months. And they studied policies from around the country, and I think they incorporated best practices in that. What's concerning right now is that we just submitted a letter to hopefully add clarifications to the rules that the Department of Education promulgated. And now they're seeking to change some of the things, some of which are appropriate, but some of them are conflating the criminal and civil criminal and disciplinary process. So it's creating some confusion. You heard us talk a little bit about what the DeVos letter in terms of rules may do. So we're trying to challenge some of those issues, and I think they've received over 100,000 comments on that at this point. So our policy, we think, is really well done. And that's why we're trying to make sure we implement it in an effective, consistent, thoughtful way. That's what these improvements are about.
Thank you, President Cross. Shanita, did you want to add on to that as well?
I don't have anything to add per se, other than we are leading the charge across the system. Perhaps additional follow-up could be done with regard to other Big Ten institutions and how we stack up against them. But we don't have any information at this point about the specifics of that.
Thank you. Regent Peterson.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. Just a couple of comments. Certainly grateful to President Cross and the work group for bringing forward the proactive steps that we've done to shine a light on sexual violence and harassment and on Title IX compliance and awareness, and also our efforts to train students, faculty, and staff to be aware and informed of what to do and where to report. And also preparing for all of the efforts related to the Federal Education Secretary's modernization efforts. So again, that's just a comment of our gratitude for your efforts. This is a question at the end of the report. It discusses, the primary responsibility of sexual harassment and violence awareness and institutional oversight will rest with our Office of General Counsel at the UW System Office. And I guess my question on behalf of the board is to General Counsel Williams, do we have appropriate resources, I think, as you consider the amount and volume of items associated with this? I just want to make sure that you feel adequately staffed from the Division of Labor perspective. So maybe just give us your thoughts on that.
Good question. Quinn, what are your thoughts?
Yes, and I think we're on track for that. We have a newly created Office of Compliance, and we're going to be bringing on a Title IX coordinator to focus on these issues to help Title IX coordinators across the system and reconstitute the Title IX coordinators meeting to ensure ongoing compliance in this very important area.
Thank you, Quinn. Regent Bechtel.
Yeah. Regent Peterson, I'm going to kind of jump off on your comment because as I'm learning here, there's a push and pull between the system and between the campuses. And just as one voice, I would say this is a perfect example where the system should take the lead and the campuses should want the system to take the lead. Where we are now in terms of this whole subject matter, I will guarantee you the trend line is going this way. And that federal law will continue to change, the mandates will continue to increase, and the importance and sensitivity around these subjects are only going to become magnified. So we do need resources, we do need centralization, we need uniform standards and discipline. We also have to have forgiveness in this policy too, because we are learning institutions. So there's a push and pull, a yin and yang, all these different things. This will be very important that we provide a safe campus. It's very important that we do it in a thoughtful way. And I think this is a prime example where the university system can be the centralized resource for that.
Thank you, Regent Bechtel. Regents, any other questions? Regent Tiedemann.
Thank you both for your report on this especially salient and critical issue. I just have one question to put the policy in the policy intent in further context. Do we have, in your report, did you have any data on how many students that experienced a violation, harassment, or violent incident, either experienced an interruption or discontinuation of their studies on our campuses, either annually or since the beginning of the report?
Since the beginning of our process, no.
Okay.
Most campuses do have that type of information. A campus climate survey is one of the best practices, and the timeliness of that, again, it becomes a resource allocation issue insofar as they're expensive. Some campuses have been lucky enough to be able to have research institutions come in and do it at a modified price, but the campus climate survey would be what you're addressing in those types of issues. So most campuses will have one. It's just a matter of how recent that was. Mm-hmm. And the reason that those aren't done as frequently as I think the campuses would want them done is because of resource allocation.
Good question. Thank you, Regent Tiedemann. Regents, any other questions? Regent Atwell?
So two questions. One, Chancellor Blank pointed out that there are standard filings that all the individual campuses make. I realize there may be data integrity issues across the system, but couldn't we start by aggregating that data and making it available to the regents? Secondly, if I'm not mistaken, we do enroll minors on our campuses, and am I safe in assuming that training differentiates clearly between alleged offenses involving a minor and someone who's not a minor. And just a comment, and then I'll ask you to answer that. If it seems that I'm a little uncomfortable about the differentiation between civil criminal actions, and Title IX within campus disciplinary matters, it's because universities wouldn't be the first institution that have tried to handle matters internally that really should have been referred to criminal authorities. And frankly, if I'm not mistaken, also criminal authorities in cases of alleged abuse or actual abuse, sexual or otherwise, do not always rely on the will of the victim in advancing criminal action. So I realize the last thing's more of a comment, but the second one with respect to minors, I'd like clarification.
Sure. Yeah, I would say on the first question, since that data is already collected by system, by all means, we can set something up to get those touch points out to board members. Very, very good question, very good point.
Thank you.
In terms of question number 2 with the minors, Christopher, if you could help us with that one.
Executive Order 54 supersedes and is a requirement throughout all of our employees, and all of our employees are required. So that would address that situation. So if an incident was reported that there was a minor victim, Executive Order 54 would take over as far as the mandatory reporting to law enforcement. That would not be a discretionary Title IX situation. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. Regents, any other questions? Otherwise, what I'd like us to do is do a thank you for Shanita and Christopher for Quinn. Your hard work is greatly appreciated, and thank you very much. Next, I'll ask all board members to stay in place while we complete the roll call vote to move into closed session. Note that afterwards, we'll relocate in the room to our left, Varsity Hall number 1. With this in mind, Vice President Peterson, can you please read the motion to go into closed session?
I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session to A, consider personal histories related to UW-Oshkosh honorary degree nomination as permitted by Section 19851F Wisconsin Stats. B, to consider a student request for review of a UW-Madison disciplinary decision as permitted by Section 19851A, F, and G. C, to consider personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons relating to the UW-Oshkosh Foundation matter, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial effect upon the reputation of such persons as permitted by Section 19851F. D, to confer with legal counsel regarding pending litigation, Bank First National versus UW-Oshkosh Foundation, Board of Regents versus Sonleitner and Wells, University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Foundation, Inc. versus Board of Regents, UW-Oshkosh Foundation, Incorporated, Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, as permitted by Section 19185G. And finally, E, to consider amended employment and additional compensation agreements for the UW-Madison head football coach as permitted by Section 191C and E Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you, Regent Vice President Peterson. May I have a second?
Second.
Second received. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Regent Bailing.